Hello, everyone. Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal. As you can see, I'm joined by a tanned-looking James Benge. I can't work out if that's the light or not. Is that the light? But you should be tanned. You've just been away for a week or so. So James is back, which means it's time for Inside Arsenal Extra Time. We didn't do one last week. We tried. We got about 12 minutes into it, James, and your Wi-Fi decided it just wasn't strong enough to do.
Yeah, or did I just pull the cable out of the Wi-Fi because I was like, no, I can't be asked for this. I'm going back to the beach. I mean, look, I feel like I've timed this holiday really well because I left a few days before the Liverpool game, and still people are clearly very angry about that still. But I have missed nothing, haven't I, other than that Liverpool game?
It has been deathly quiet, mate. Deathly quiet. You know what? I hadn't even thought of that. It was all a big ploy, wasn't it? It wasn't the Wi-Fi. It was just you wanting to go back to the beach. You wasted my time, didn't you? You just wanted to go back and get another cocktail. How was it anyway? Was it a good holiday? I'm sure it was great.
It was absolutely lovely. Yeah. Cambodia, a bit of Ho Chi Minh City as well, in Vietnam. In case people think I don't know my geography. Yeah, just beautiful. Great time of year to go away. I am much like I hope the Arsenal players who've been in Dubai. I am feeling rested, recuperated, and ready for the big push because it's going to be a rough few months ahead for anyone that's trying to cover football. I started doing my accreditation for games, and I think I have about one every 3 days between now and mid-February. So it's going to take a lot out of us, but that's what we want, isn't it? Because I suspect you've had a rough old time keeping things going over the last few weeks.
Yeah, it's been so quiet, mate, the last couple of weeks. It really has. And I did, after the Liverpool game, it did feel like a nice time to have a little bit of a break from football. It felt like it came at a good time for Arsenal, obviously, on the back of those results and the performances, but it wasn't long. It was only a couple of days into that. I was just like, oh my God, I want football back now. And the annoying thing is that we're back this weekend, but then next weekend there's no game. So it's like another 10 days to Arsenal play, isn't it? So it's going to be another sort of quiet.
It's the sort of schedule that like a relegation threatened team have, because they've just been knocked out of the FA Cup and they don't have like a League Cup. It's absolutely baffling. There's some, and obviously normally at this time of year we'd have, at the very least, like even if Arsenal weren't doing business, we could kind of give an Arsenal view on, say, what City or Liverpool or whoever are doing. Nothing is happening. It's so weird.
I saw someone say the other day that so far to this point in January, 10% of what was spent last January has been spent. I mean, and that basically must be just Tottenham. I can't think of anyone else doing anything. It's just Tottenham with that Harry Kane money burning a hole in their pocket as the only club that have done anything. It has been just the most quiet January. Do you think that is like purely down to the profit and sustainability laws that, you know, before basically this window or maybe last window we barely even spoke about, really? We'd occasionally mention FFP, but suddenly it's become a word just absolutely right slap bang in the middle of the football vocabulary all of a sudden.
I mean, you know as well as I do that you'd sort of, when that first Everton charge dropped in sort of early to mid-November, and you'd sort of, that's the sort of time when you're texting around, isn't it? And at that stage, you're quite often getting, responses that are like, oh, we don't really know what's going to happen, keeping an eye on the market, you're not getting much. And then almost within a few days of that Everton news dropping, it was like, this is beyond Arsenal, I'd say. So many clubs are like, don't expect, not looking at doing much. They actually, I think they've been quite chilled by this. We know that Arsenal obviously were conscious of PSR even beforehand. I mean, it was really interesting seeing Gary O'Neill yesterday basically admit that Wolves had just sold players to get under this. So I think the smart clubs, and I like in this context, I'd include Arsenal in that. I think the smart clubs saw this coming anyway, and maybe that's why we saw a lot of spending in the summer. But I think also it's just, what's also true is it's never been a good market, and I think
that's never stopped people before, though. I mean, there was a lot of money spent last January. It's never been a good market, but it still does end up, things still do happen. And we do still have a couple of weeks left or whatever it is. Yeah, a couple of weeks left. So there's still things might happen in this month, and I imagine they will. But Yeah, even so, I've still never seen it as quiet as this.
I think a lot of teams in the sort of bottom half of the table are probably priced in that Luton, Bournemouth, not Bournemouth, Burnley, and definitely Sheffield United are goners. So you don't need to sort of spend your way out. And I think those three teams have probably been like, well,
Well, they're saying that
let's try and stay up with what we've got.
If Everton get hit with another points deduction, then that relegation race is suddenly going to be thrown wide open again. You would think,
and they can't. They're the one team that can't spend their way to safety.
Yeah, it does seem quite mad that it seems like they're going to basically they're being punished for the same thing again. It's I don't quite understand how that's working.
Unfair, isn't it? It's just unfair.
It feels a bit weird, but I'm sure there must be. It can't be that simple that they are just being punished for the same thing again. There has to be something else for them to face another charge on it. But I just haven't looked into it too much, to be honest.
Well, it's what they say, isn't it? They say, look, the EFL rules sort of say, what is it, double indemnity or whatever. You can't be tried twice for the same crime, which is effectively what's happening. I mean, I find the Forest one fascinating because their whole defense seems to rely on look, we would have sold Brennan Johnson earlier for less. And it's sort of like, what about if you didn't sign, and I was checking the numbers here, what about if you didn't sign 4 left backs? What about if you didn't sign 4 goalkeepers, 5 centre backs? Like, that might be where your problem is, not that you had to wait to take money for Brennan Johnson. You don't have a leg to stand on, guys. Those are the rules.
Yeah, I thought that. It made me laugh. It's like they're sort of scrambling around the defence about one sale when they signed about 45 players in about 2 windows. It's like, yeah, I think you probably could have got your house in order a little bit better than that.
Same with Newcastle, by the way, being all like, oh, boo-hoo, we might have to sell one of our players. You might have to. Yeah, congratulations. Welcome to football.
I mean, that's what I said. I did this. I talked about this on one of my shows earlier this week. I mean, these rules, it's not like these are new rules. These rules have been there for a long time, and the clubs were the ones who voted these rules in. And now suddenly, and I get, since they were passed and everything like that, inflation's gone up, transfer fees have spiraled, wages have continued to spiral. So they probably do have to look at it and maybe take that into account. But
they're the ones causing inflation, the clubs.
Yeah, and exactly. I just think the clubs have voted for it. A lot of them have help contribute to the explosion of wages and prices and values and things like that, and then suddenly a load of them are complaining that it's stopping them from doing a load of business. So there's a lot of people that I'm not feeling too sorry for. I kind of feel sorry for Everton because it seems like they're being punished twice, but everyone else, it's like, yeah, well, these are the rules, lads, and you were central to them coming in, so I'm not sure you should be complaining too much. I mean, from an Arsenal point of view, obviously it's been very, very quiet since we last spoke. Absolute soddle has happened. Apart from their signing Karim Benzema, obviously, which is absolutely, obviously, everything we've spoken about in the last few minutes can go out the window because they're going to sign 36-year-old Karim Benzema on
£1 million a week,
who's earning about 100 million a year, and sign him on a 6-month loan deal. But all jokes aside, obviously that's not going to happen, and I've spoken about that in the show before. But we have had a lot of people sort of sending in. Actually, before I get to Ivan Toney, I'll bring up. There was a question I wanted to add. Let me find it for you. That because I've had so many people asking about Benzema, it's just made me laugh. But so news has been rife. This is from Kahan. So news has been rife about Benzema coming to Arsenal. How would he fit into the current squad? Will Jesus be played in the 8 role? Yeah. And we're not going to answer that in relation to him actually coming in because it's not going to happen. But it just made me think while I was reading it. I was like, imagine if Benzema did come in. What would the team be with Benzema in it? Would Benzema start in this Arsenal team right now? And for as much as he's obviously a recent Ballon d'Or winner, fantastic player, amazing player, he has been playing out in Saudi Arabia for 6 months. I have no idea how sharp he would be. So for all the name, that as big as the name is, I don't even think if he came in, which again is not going to happen, but if he came, I don't even think he walks straight into this Arsenal side at all. Do you?
I think he would. I mean, I don't want to take it too far back because I always sort of moan when other people say, oh yeah, he did this thing 2 years ago. It's like he was 2 years younger then. But I was lucky enough, obviously, CBS Champions League role to pretty much follow Karim Benzema around England during
Yeah.
Madrid's last Champions League win, where he just was sort of turning up in every city and just causing outright devastation
He
wherever
was
he
unreal.
left.
I know he was. I know he was unreal in that run.
He wasn't much worse last season. So kind of,
He was a bit worse last season.
He was. I'm inclined to sort of, if in this magic, I presume Al Ittihad here are covering the wages, and
Yeah,
this is
absolutely.
Benzema's doing it for
giving away for free.
Yeah, exactly. Benzema's doing it for the to make the dreams come true of all those kids from 2015 who dreamed he was signing. I would assume what I would do is play Jesus left, Benzema through the middle, Saka right. Yeah, I think it would. I think he would. But like, I know what you mean. I mean, you're not exactly going to get. You're going to have to say that the pressing is going to take a little bit of a step back.
Do you think?
A little bit.
Right. Here's a question for you. Here's a question for you. Right now, given their fitness and everything like that, coming in right now, who would you rather, Benzema or Giroud?
No, you're going to make me say this, and I mean Giroud.
I've already said it. I said it as well. I would have Giroud over Benzema right now, and people hate that answer. I know they hate that answer, but I genuinely would. I would have Giroud over Benzema right now for 6 months until the end of the season on a loan to get Arsenal through to the summer when they make their big summer signing as a striker. I'd be picking Giroud.
And I mean, jumping ahead to that question, he's not the one I would pick of the sort of players linked, but imagine if you could sort of do this time machine and get like latter days Chelsea Olivier Giroud at Arsenal. I sort of feel like the Giroud that was at Arsenal was the one that learned sort of through, he learned through failure, didn't he? And there's so many cuts and scars that he carried to Chelsea that nothing could hurt him from then onwards. And for a while, I always thought he was underrated, and I always thought he was a very good footballer, but maybe not a title-winning striker. But actually, I think the player in latter days Chelsea probably was a title-winning striker, because you would have got a way better. Who was it then? The players around him would have been so much better. I think if the prime example here is if in those 6 months where it's just Lacazette, if you could swap Lacazette for Giroud, then do Arsenal make top 4? Yeah, in a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. It's quite sad, isn't it, that the way that I mean, well, there were. I think he left with his sort of head held high, didn't he? But it's sad that still Giroud has this reputation among the Arsenal fan base entirely based around a few months in 2016 where he definitely was not the only bad player, and he wasn't the main problem at all.
No, he got the blame for not winning that title. And I think he got the blame for Mesut Ozil not getting the assist record, which I think a lot of people care more about than the title.
It's true.
But it was not just on Giroud. Yes, the goals dried up, but no one played very well in the second half of that season. But I think Giroud's a really underrated player. And look, I'm not saying Arsenal should sign him at all. This is just purely hypothetical, but I think he's a good player. Like you, I think he's really underrated. And I think ultimately that deal, letting him go, did not work out very well, because that season Arsenal had to play the second half of the season without Aubameyang able to play in the Europa League, and they ended up going out in the semi-final because they basically had only Lacazette, and that was it, because Aubameyang was cup tied, wasn't he? And had Giroud stuck around, then he would have been available.
And Mkhitaryan was wearing 77. It was weird times.
Yeah, and you look at what Giroud went on to win, and what he's continuing to do. To be fair, he's had a remarkable career, and the latter stage of his career, from turning 30 onwards, just unbelievable. Fair play to him. The one at the bottom from Jordan, I wanted to include here because obviously it's fun. Just being linked with Benzema just makes me laugh. It just reminds me of those hilarious couple of summers when it was all the links were going on with him and Higuain and everyone like that. Although I think Higuain was obviously a lot closer to actually signing than Benzema ever was, but. Thinking back to Arsenal's links with Benzema 10 years ago and now being in the same place again, what player or few players do you wish Arsenal had signed in the last 10 years? I'm going now, he says linked or not, but I'm just going to ask you purely who were linked. Not obviously you can mention anyone, but players who it looked at a time like might actually sign for Arsenal and they could have possibly got them. Is there anyone that sort of springs out to you?
Someone that springs out, but I mean, it's sort of that linked, and not only were they linked, Arsenal made a bid, but and you will remember this. I remember it was a few weeks where we all went a bit mad, didn't we? Do you remember when Arsenal were trying to sign Kylian Mbappe?
Yep.
Whew. Just wait, there's a report in L'Equipe, wasn't it, one morning? Just sort of seeing Arsenal made a bid for Mbappe, and you were like, yeah, sure they have.
Yeah.
And then you sort of dig around. Yeah. And you're just like, what?
I remember sitting in press conference. It was one of my first, I think probably 6 months into the job at Football London. I was sitting in a press conference at Sydney Harbour on the pre-season tour to Australia. And I was asking Arsene Wenger about Mbappe. And, they were absolutely trying for him that summer. And I remember writing a story. That story still does the rounds on Twitter every time again.
Doesn't it?
Of Arsenal getting increasingly confident about Mbappe. And I heard that from a good source at the time, that they were starting to think that Wenger's influence was going to actually win through. But then he just continued to get better and better and better. And it became too much. But yeah, I hadn't even thought of
I tell you a story on that?
Yeah.
I spoke to Arsene Wenger post-retirement a few months after a little while after he'd left. And I sort of said, like, Mbappe, did you think it was going to happen? And he said to me, they were looking at it in January, but they didn't sort of, effectively it was like they're looking in January, but they didn't quite strike for it. And he thinks if they'd gone then, they would have got Mbappe, but they just left it too late in the end. And by then he'd sort of elevated to a plane that was, I mean, he didn't say this bit, but you could tell it was sort of, by then, because he'd knocked City out of the Champions League, hadn't he? He'd just looked like the best young player in the world, which he was. And he'd reached a level that Arsenal weren't at that time. But they would have been if they signed Mbappe almost overnight.
On a couple of occasions, before he signed his first pro contract at Monaco, Wenger and Gramondi were over sitting in his house in France with his parents, and they thought they'd got him. But he decided to stick around with Monaco and sign that pro contract. And yeah, there's so many sliding doors moments with Arsenal. I mean, the famous ones, obviously, Ronaldo and even Messi to some respects. I remember speaking to Francis Cagao about how close that one was. But Ronaldo, they were, they thought they had him at one point, and then United came in and blew him out the water with the money, and football history went down another route. But that was one. What I think about, certainly in the last sort of decade or so, that I think would have made a huge difference if Wenger actually followed through from it. I think Wenger actually admits it himself. It's one that he's really. He still thinks about N'Golo Kante. He was right there for the taking for Arsenal, and Wenger chose not to do it. And he admitted that's one of his big regrets. And I look back to that, and when Arsenal were really heavily linked with him, and they didn't make the move for him, and he ended up going to Chelsea. I know they were looking at him before he went to Leicester, but also that summer when he could have gone to Arsenal, but went to Chelsea. And again, it could have all been a completely different story. He signed someone as transformative as that, and he was that transformative at the time. He was just such a good player.
Thomas Lemar as well, just because it would have been amazing if that story of people hammering on his hotel room door had subsequently ended with him opening the door and going, "Yes, take me to Arsenal." What an evening that was. That
was a mad. I was at Canary Wharf in Football London Towers during that transfer deadline day. It was that was a crazy one. So I think that's probably enough for the Karim Benzema.
We've got a lot of time to pad.
We do, and there's not much bit to talk about at the moment. So there's lots of questions that is basically included. This is almost like a Q&A type show this week. And so there's plenty to talk about. But obviously, what did you make of Ivan Toney? Did you see his interview with Sky Sports yesterday ahead of his return? He did. Well, I'm not sure how happy I'd have been as a Brentford fan just ahead of his return, at him basically not shooting down the idea of leaving this month.
I've only seen the clips, because you always sort of fear with, like, especially at this time of the year with Sky Sports, and the fact that, I turn on Sky Sports now and it's the transfer show, transfer deadline latest, transfer news, and nothing's happening. So I'm like, was this like one of 20 questions and it's the only thing we've seen? And actually, Tony spent a lot of time talking about the debt he owes to Brentford and all that. But I mean, we've kind of known for a long time, haven't we, that he's ready to move on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. You still hear suggestions that this whole saga might run right the way through to the end of his contract, because it seems the least plausible scenario at the moment is him signing a new deal with Brentford. But what this pathway is that ends with Ivan Toney moving away from Brentford this month. Like, I can't for the life of me see it. Obviously, if anything, if they don't beat Forest this weekend, they're in big trouble, which is ridiculous. And they will turn it round. They are a good team that's just had bad luck. But like, if you're in that scenario, you don't sort of test your luck by selling your star striker, do you? Especially when you've got no Mbuemo, no Wissa, so many players out injured, and you've got Sergio Reguilon on there as well. Oof. It's not getting better.
How do you think he'll do, Toney? What are you sort of expecting him in the second half of the season at Brentford? Are you looking forward to seeing how he gets on? I'm quite intrigued to see if this sort of layoff, is there going to be any rust or anything like that? It's it's going to be all sort of eyes are going to be on him as well. The sort of intrigue levels, and obviously with the transfer stuff in the background as well, everyone's going to be focusing on him. I'm really interested to see how he gets on.
There has to be rust, doesn't there? He's played against Southampton under 21s for Brentford B team, and he's played against there's an Italian team, is it Como? I may be wrong on that, but there's an Italian team in there as well. It's nothing to prepare him for Premier League defenses. And I mean, I don't think he exactly sort of hit the ground running when he arrived in the Premier League. No one would expect him to, but this is a player coming back off, it's not quite like an ACL, because obviously you don't have to sort of doubt your physical limits like you do when you come back from a big injury. But you do just have to like kind of almost reintegrate yourself into a team, and they will have worked hard on that on the training ground over the last 4 months. But you have to, one thing to say, and I quite enjoy watching a lot of Brentford because they're a really interesting statistical team, is they have changed quite a bit. And how much of that they will sort of keep going in terms of, looking to spring balls that are more in behind rather than trying to hit Toney. I don't know how much they will change, but it is a really different team. There'll be no Mbuemo, there'll be no Raya.
They'll have to change.
Yeah. I can't remember the last time we saw something like this. Even someone like Trippier was only gone for 3-4 weeks. I mean, it's really, really hard to know.
No, it's kind of like Cantona coming back after kicking the fan at Selhurst Park. Although the difference, obviously, Cantona was walking back into still a very good Manchester United team. Toney's walking into a Brentford team who are clearly struggling right now, and without some of his, the sort of front line that he'd made pretty fearsome with those players also absent. So it's going to be interesting to see how he copes with it. I think it's certainly going to be add a lot of extra spice to Brentford games. They're on TV, aren't they? Saturday night. It's already a televised one. I think they're getting, they're sort of billing it as the big return. So I think it's good to see him back. There's not too many top quality strikers in the Premier League right now, and I think it's good to get him back. And I think everyone's going to be paying very close attention to see how he gets on over the coming weeks.
Are you still keen on him for the summer?
I'm still keen on him. Yeah, I am still keen. I'm not keen on. I don't know. Oh, I was going to say I'm not keen on him for £100 million, but then also I don't really care too much about what the price is. It's not my money.
It's what's the price of the other players, isn't it?
Yeah,
100 for Toney, 130 for Osimhen.
Did you see today Matt Law's story in the Telegraph that Chelsea are valuing Armando Broja at between 50 and 60 million pounds? It's just bonkers. Like, what has he done to be worth 50 to 60 million pounds? I mean, he's a 15 million pound player, a 20 million pound player. How could he possibly be worth that? I mean, what's Eddie Nketiah worth if Broja's worth 50 to 60 million?
Well, the one thing we know about Chelsea is they do tend to overvalue footballers.
They do, and people have been replying to me today saying, "Yeah, well, look, you're saying that the Chelsea are crazy to do it. They valued Havertz at 65 million, and we went up and spent the money on him, and they're quite good at getting value.
£2 million a goal. That's what they're pricing him at.
What is it? It's like
it's probably about what they pay per goal, isn't it?
That's the same as what Aubameyang cost only a few years ago, coming from Dortmund to Arsenal at that level, and now suddenly players like Armando Broja are worth that. It's just crazy, and that's what when I say I don't care about the money for Toney, I suppose the more £100 million transfers there are, the more it's just spiraling out of control in terms of the rest of the market, because everyone's looking at this. It's like Matt Law in his story said Chelsea are looking at Brighton valuing Evan Ferguson at £100 million. And to be fair, I can see that he's a very good player. But
Yeah.
what has Evan Ferguson done to be valued at £100 million? It's crazy. And yeah, the more that these sort of transfers happen, the more that's just going to become the norm. And suddenly £20 million players are going to be valued at £60 million. And where does football go from there? I don't really know. So yeah, from saying I don't care about the money, maybe I do.
I mean, I think all of that can be true. Like, and that Ferguson, it's a big price to pay. I mean, what's Evan Ferguson, 19? Amanda Bray is 22. Like, he is now not a ultra young player anymore. He, of course, is still, he doesn't have a lot of football in his legs, but they can look at sort of the valuations of Højlund and Ferguson, and then they should maybe take a step back and go, Højlund was considered one of the best young strikers in the world. Ferguson is considered one of the best young strikers in the world. Amanda Broja is not. Like, that's why they're valued at so much more, because they are the potential there, the ceiling for them is a lot higher than it is for Armando Broja, who seems a good player, but like, you don't. If he's your starting striker, I mean, Southampton only just sort of clung on that season with him at leading the line, didn't they?
Yeah.
It's not good.
No. It makes me think, what's Eddie Nketiah worth? If seriously he's going for 50, 60 million. And obviously them valuing him at that does not mean that's what he's going to go for. But should he go for, should someone be mad enough to pay that sort of money for him, then, the money that Arsenal could ask for Nketiah is suddenly looking at about £70 million price tag for Eddie Nketiah, surely, which is just mad. It's just totally crazy. It's just transfer madness, honestly. It is crazy. And like you compare it again to the Højlund transfer, but everyone on this planet knew that Højlund was not worth that money that Manchester United paid. It was just stupid money. It was just Manchester United being stupid, which is what they always are in the transfer market. And I don't think you can just point to one or two transfers and say, well, he went for that, so he's worth this, because everyone knows United it was just a crazy price tag to pay for a clearly talented young striker, but he'd done nothing to warrant that sort of price tag. Yeah, it's mad to me. But anyway, what are your plans this weekend? Are you at Arsenal on Saturday?
I am. I did want to go to Brentford, but then you tried to get back from. I thought about doing that, but you've done 2 Premier League games in a day before? It's hellish.
I have not done 2 Premier League games in a day before.
No, and you shouldn't. It's daft. You just then your mind is the sort of complete mulch. But I think I will watch it. The winter break is a lovely idea, and I'm fully in favour of it until I sort of sit down and turn the TV on and realise there's only 4 games this weekend. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to Arsenal Palace. It's
massive.
It feels like a bit like how I build the Fulham game, where you've got a team there that's, I mean, frankly, in worse form than Fulham are, but a team that's not looking particularly hot at the moment. Coming up against them, this should be a game where you not just win, but fill your boots, and that's something Arsenal have not done in an awfully long time. That table looks so different with the 3 points in it. Even if they played a game more than City, I mean, they're probably not going to overtake City, but just getting away from worrying about Tottenham in your rearview mirror a little bit. I don't think there's much to worry about there with Spurs, but I wouldn't want to be sandwiched between them and Villa for much longer, because that is actually, when we talked about the start of the season, we all said, what would be a good season or what would be a disappointing season. Scrapping for top 4 actually would for me fall in the category of disappointing season, even if it ends with Arsenal qualified for the Champions League. And I don't think that will happen. I think Arsenal are having their blip now, and there will probably be a run of games where they get very hot in front of goal at some stage. But yeah, it's enough to worry about, isn't it? Yeah, and this project goes backwards quite quickly if they don't get to the Champions League.
Oh, big time, yeah. No, they've kind of lost their safety net now, really, with those 2 results. It's they've got very little room for error now, because when you're... And I still think Arsenal should be looking at the title. Obviously, I'm not ready to wave the white flag in the title race yet by any means. But when you're going up against teams like Liverpool, Manchester City, who have been there, done that, both of them recently. I know Liverpool are a little bit different in terms of personnel, certainly in midfield, than they were when they were going up against City. But they've still got that know-how of sort of muscle memory of what it's like at this stage of the season. And Man City, we know, just an absolute machine in the second half of the season, and they've got De Bruyne back now, which was very scary last week seeing that. Yeah, not ideal, especially with Haaland to come back as well. But they can't. Arsenal. I was talking before on a show I did just after the Liverpool game, and I was talking about, is this crisis time for Arsenal? I was like, I don't think it's there yet, but if this goes on for 1 or 2 more games, and it definitely is, they have to respond this weekend. It's a really huge game that they have to take 6 points from on Friday, Saturday, and then Forest. You've got to take 6 points from those 2 games going, and before Liverpool comes to the Emirates in the league. You win those 2 games and then beat Liverpool at the Emirates, and things look very, very different very, very quickly. And it was only a couple of games ago that Arsenal were top of the Premier League. So it can change, but like you said, this needs to be Arsenal's blip, doesn't it? Now it just can't carry on, and the blip can't turn into anything longer than it is now, because it's not just those 2 games. It does go back to basically the Aston Villa game. I think it's 1 win in 6 or 7 in the league, isn't it? There has been some good results in that, like the win against Brighton was a very good one. The draw at Anfield was a very good one. Even some of the performances in those defeats have been decent, but you can't keep saying, okay performance, but it didn't get the result. If they want to keep up with City and Liverpool, they've got to win, and they've got to win now.
Yeah, but obviously the thing you can cling to is, it's sort of like, if the performances are there, then like they were against West Ham, like they were against Liverpool in the FA Cup, I mean, I wish someone could sort of talk to Kai Havertz about the benefits of hitting a shot first time, because it's so rare he does that. Anyway, side note, like, as long as the performances are there, I feel like you can trust that the results will come. And so far, that Fulham game is not just the only sort of aberration of that run. It's like the only game this season where you've looked at it and gone, Arsenal were dreadful. And so it's just a freak game. I think that's in the end, Arsenal are playing like a team that are in title contention, and sometimes those teams in title contention drop silly points. How often do I mean, the one that people always come back to is the treble-winning City team got knocked out of the Carabao Cup by Nathan Jones and dropped points to Frank Lampard. Like, it can happen.
Mm-hmm.
It can't happen for too long though.
No.
So yeah, like you say, anything less than 6 points before Liverpool, that turns Liverpool into absolute cannot lose.
Yeah.
It may well be cannot lose anyway. We'll see what Liverpool's results are, but you really need to make sure you're not going into this game with any sort of doubts and any sort of increased pressure beyond what there will be for one of the best games of the season, hopefully.
Are you going to Toney tomorrow for the presser?
No, I got cleaners in. It's just isn't this the incredibly prosaic life that you live when you work from home?
I'm interested to see what he's got to say, Arteta, tomorrow, about what the mood's been like over in Dubai. He talked a lot about the reset, didn't he, going there? And I think it did need a bit of a reset. I think, and a lot of the work, from what I understand, that's gone on over there, it's obviously been about keeping fit and all that and training, but a lot of the work's been going on into minds as well as bodies, and I can kind of understand that, because it was beginning to feel like, when you were watching them, tired minds, sort of psychological issues in front of goal. It felt like they did need a bit of downtime over there to reset, like Mikel said, and sort of come back and be ready to go again. And hopefully they have sort of done everything they needed to do over there, and they can come back, because it can, like I said, it can turn quickly. And I would not be at all surprised to turn up at the Emirates on Sunday and Arsenal to win 3 or 4-0. A couple of goals to go in early doors, and Martinelli to score, Jesus to score, Saka to score. I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if that happened, because they've been threatening to do it, and someone's going to get an absolute hammer in at some point if Arsenal continue to play like that and create chances and dominate the ball like they do in the final third. And it could well happen at Palace. So it was interesting. They got beaten in the cup yesterday, and Hodgson took off Eze with about sort of half an hour to go and got booed by his own fans for it. And he was saying, look, I'm disappointed, but you'd be more disappointed if he got injured and then missed Arsenal on Saturday. So he's obviously trying to protect players as best he can for Saturday. But the fact that they have played on Wednesday night in Liverpool, and then it's Saturday lunchtime kickoff, Arsenal have had 2 weeks to prepare for this game. All the stars are aligning there. That means that Arsenal should have a big advantage for this game on Saturday, and they should be ready to really hit the ground running.
Can't prepare that much for Eze though if he's in the mood and if he's fit.
No.
I mean, the same with the one thing that worries me a lot about this game is, whether it's Zinchenko, but probably more likely Kivior, whoever they have at left back has got to sort of defend against Michael Olise, and that left spot, that left area is just looking so vulnerable at the moment. And I feel like that, Olise could be a complete match winner for Palace. I mean, we saw how much of a slog it was to beat them at Selhurst. Now, admittedly, Arsenal had a ludicrous red card against them, and they defended quite well as well as I remember. But like those forwards can just do that out of nowhere, beat you and score. I mean, Palace don't look like a team that's capable of doing that at the moment, but I don't know. Maybe it's just because you just can't believe that. Yes, Olise or Eze might do one moment of brilliance.
Well, that's why Arsenal need to score more than one. They need to score, and they need to score more than one goal to sort of take that jeopardy out of it. And that's what they've not been doing recently, isn't it? That jeopardy's always been in games because they haven't finished games off like they should have done. And what do you think he'll do, sort of team selection wise? I'm not sure about Zinchenko. He's still a doubt, and I haven't heard that he's been training over there with the rest of the team yet. So it looks like that one's dragging on a little bit. Which, like you say, I imagine Kivior's going to play against Liverpool. He kind of went with more of a traditional flat back forward, didn't he? Kivior didn't really play that inverted role, and you had Jorginho and Declan Rice were playing basically as more of a traditional 2 with Odegaard playing as a 10. Do you think he might do something similar if there is no Zinchenko tomorrow? How do you on Saturday? Sorry, how do you think he'll set up for this one, or should set up?
It's tough, isn't it? Because I think Havertz is one of a number of players that kind of needs to find their moment hitting the net again. And instinctively, against a sort of struggling Palace side, I'm like, Jorginho and Rice feels a bit safe. But I think we're maybe just at this, you don't want to throw out the, like, I've just spent ages saying Arsenal are playing well. So part of me says, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But then a bit of me just thinks maybe at times it's got a little overcomplicated. And like you say, sort of going back to something a little bit more balanced, where you're not asking Jakub Kivior to do a job he just can't quite do as that inverted fullback. Getting 2 midfielders, true central midfielders that sit and dictate tempo, using Odegaard as more of a pure 10, a bit more, hopefully, I mean, what would be one of the best things that could come from this winter break is if Ben White has just been able to suppress that niggle he's been dealing with. And if he was bombing on, I think Arsenal would just feel like a much more potent attacking force. Yeah, I mean, I do see the argument for sort of drifting away from the 4-3-3 towards a 4-2-3-1 and just getting things a little bit more organized and safe and more 7 out of 10 rather than like risk of 9s or 5s.
Quite like.
I think he'll probably do a 4th. I think he'll probably just do Havertz.
I think he probably will do Havertz. I'd stick with Jorginho and Rice, I think, and I'd have Havertz on the bench and put Jesus back as central striker, and then maybe bring Havertz on as a striker in the second half if things need changing, or you just bring him on in midfield. But I'd stick with Jorginho. I don't think Jorginho's played enough recently, and I thought he played well against Liverpool. And in the absence of Partey, just having that guy there who can play the balls like he does, I think Arsenal missed it a little bit. But like you said, I kind of agree with you. I think he will go back to the Havertz and Odegaard ahead of Rice, but I would quite like to see Jorginho playing there. Right, I'm going to move on to some questions now for the sort of second half of this show. We've got quite a lot of them to go through. Daniel here is asking why Arsenal are not looking to sell Ramsdale and Smith Rowe this window because they've hardly played this season. He said, can you answer the question on Inside Arsenal? He then says, Eddie's not improved and sell him. It's just not as easy as that, is it? I don't think Arsenal absolutely would want to sell Ramsdale and Smith Rowe in this window anyway, because of you don't really want to weaken yourselves. I think if someone came in with a very good offer for them, I think they probably would, though certainly consider it. But I just don't think, from what I understand anyway, that has just not happened. There's been inquiries, we know, from Crystal Palace about Eddie, but I don't think there's actually been a bid yet. And there's certainly not been a bid, as far as I'm aware, for Ramsdale or Smith Rowe. So I think unless someone actually bids for your players, it's quite hard to sell them. It's basically as simple as that, isn't it?
Yep, exactly like you say. It takes 3 to tango in the transfer market, and it's like we were saying at the top of the show. There's been 2 permanent transfers in the Premier League. I think that's a combined spend of £30 million. Like you said,
Is
most
it
of it
really? Is that true?
2
Is that
transfers.
wow?
The young Turkish lad at Brentford, apologies to him, I can't remember his name, and Dragusin at Spurs.
Wow.
And most teams haven't even loaned anyone because nowadays a loan is not a cheap way of strengthening your squad either. It's just not happening. And if Arsenal, there's a balance to strike here as well, isn't there? Like if you start hawking around your players, kind of like Arsenal did with Kieran Tierney, you can find quite quickly that actually people go, well, they really need to sell these. They're really desperate to sell these guys. We'll make an offer here, but it'll be a bargain offer, and it'll suit us, not Arsenal. I think people
just
imagine
mentioning Kieran Tierney there. I saw a report today. I have no idea if it's true yet, but I saw a report today from Spain saying that Sociedad have decided already not to take that option up to turn that permanent in the summer. Again, I don't know how true that is, but so I saw one of the outlets in Spain was reporting that today.
Wouldn't shock me, would it? I mean, like
he's been injured, hasn't he? He's back now, but he has been injured again.
And his wages, although he was not one of the best paid players at Arsenal, a well-paid player at Arsenal is one of the top earners at Sociedad. I don't believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that Sociedad are paying all of his salary. I think Arsenal are helping out there because they had to get him out of the club, really, because there wasn't going to be a role for him. And yeah, I hadn't even seen that report, but
I don't know if it's true.
Scans, doesn't it? Makes sense.
Right. Next up, we've got one from Brandon here. It says, extra time. Hi, Charles and James. There are some fans who want us to sign a striker and some a winger. I think we desperately need a central midfielder. At the moment, our left side is struggling defensively as well as an attacking wise. Player like Cooper Menez, is that right? Is that how you pronounce it, James?
Cooper Miners. Yeah, Cooper Miners. Something like that.
Would suit Arteta's style of play. He can fall in at left back when Zinni's overlapping, joining the attack, and he can join the attack or put long range shot when we go against a low block. Do you know if there's a reason why his name has not come up with transfer targets linked to Arsenal? Well, I presume just because Arsenal aren't looking at him, but I don't know that at all. But I'm going to throw this one over to you just because I'm presuming, again, given your far superior knowledge of European football due to your job, that you might have seen more than him than I have.
Not a clue.
No.
I feel like I vaguely know enough to sort of get a sense of the sort of player that Brandon's talking about, which is maybe someone that is, I'm going to say it, a bit Granit Xhaka-y, like a player that can, not quite box to box, but can float in the middle of the pitch, can get forward.
Is this a Zubimendi type?
It is a Zubimendi type, I would say. Although more of an 8. I think certainly for Sociedad, Zubimendi plays as a sort of tempo setting 6. I really like this idea. I don't think Arsenal were wrong to conclude that they needed a Kai Havertz or a player playing at like the peak of Kai Havertz's ability as a left 8. But I think they still need a player that's a bit more Granit Xhaka-y. Now, maybe that is just Declan Rice, and Declan Rice can't play there because Thomas Partey has been injured all season. That's kind of part of what I'm thinking. But we do know they're looking at that guys like Zubimendi for realistically for the summer. I don't know as much as others that have reported on this. I know there are a lot of people that are really across that story. Koopman is in particular. Sorry, I should know more about him than I do. Not been great on my Serie A this season.
Yeah,
but
Zubimendi's one that is definitely one to look out for, isn't it? Yeah, like you, it's not one that I'm absolutely on top of or anything, but clearly there are other journalists who really believe this is a really sort of hot one and that it could well happen come the summer. He's got a release clause that makes it look very, very attractive. I mean, look, Arsenal are going to have to sort out that position for the long term. They're going to have a long-term plan for that position because, Partey, Jorginho, El Neni, they've all got one thing in common when it comes to age and contract situations. So, long-term Arsenal have got to be thinking, and they will be thinking about what they're going to do. And Zubimendi, I'm sure, is right at the top of that list, and he's one of the players that they are looking at. Whether it happens, we'll have to wait and see. But I would suggest that the reason we're not seeing Cooper Miners sort of linked heavily is just because purely he's not really a player that sort of is on the list at the moment with Arsenal. They've got other targets. But thank you, Brandon, for getting in touch with that one. Here's one from Alex, which made me laugh. I thought I had to put it on because I thought it was funny. Why is everything on social media so negative about Arsenal? We were top at Christmas, and suddenly people are writing us out of the league. I think just the fact that you got the word social media in there, Alex, is the answer, to be honest, because basically social media has to be negative pretty much. There are some good things about it, and it can be fun. You've got to hunt around a lot to find the fun, but it can
a lot more than you used to.
Yeah, definitely a lot more than you used to. But I just think loudest voices are heard, and on social media, there's a lot of loud people shouting very, very loudly and angrily. And I think it's not just a case of Arsenal. I'm sure if you're following any other football team, it's exactly the same. And when there's been a bad run of form, there are lots of people who think they know better. And I presume that's what it's like.
It has to be said, this isn't inside Twitter or inside X, but I mean, the whole blue tick thing, and I know that I'm sure you share my bitterness, Charles, that ours were snatched from us. But that whole blue tick Twitter, blue tick thing has just sort of served to what's the right word? But sort of raise the prominence of the idiots, because if you're paying Elon Musk £8 or more a month so that your replies are at the top of other people's, you are an idiot. And those tweets are the ones I see first. I mean, personally, like, I know you weren't as much of a sort of power Twitter user as I was maybe a year or so ago, but I don't even see the fun conversations anymore. Like, you would see really interesting Arsenal supporters chatting about whether it's transfers, tactics, whatever. No one's having those conversations anymore because they keep getting bombarded by loud, obnoxious a-holes that just want to tell you that you're an idiot, that your club's a dead club, whatever it might be, that think that you are like a spokesperson for Arsenal, whatever it is. It's no surprise that certain bad faith merchants I see are back on Twitter.
Well, I think a lot of people have been waiting for Arsenal to have a bad run of form as well, haven't they? To sort of, they're set in their ways in terms of how they feel about the manager or about the team or about the owners or whatever. And they've been waiting for a bad run of form to start, being able to voice their opinion again. And
the joy of being any manager out is that 99% of the time you will be vindicated. Like, Arteta's probably going to get sacked one day. Like, it's unlikely that he walks on his own terms. Even Wenger didn't really kind of get to go in the right way. It's very rare that you kind of get to step out into the sunset at your high point and everyone's like, no, we want you to stay. It's the easiest thing in the world to just sort of say Arteta's a rubbish manager, Arsenal should sack him, because eventually you'll be able to say, yeah, I've been saying this for years and look, I'm right. You might have been saying in 2018 Arteta right, or 2019, but you were wrong in 2021 and 2022 when you were saying that.
One of the best things about the sort of change in my working pattern since the end of last season, since leaving goal, is that I just don't have to be on top of news as much as I used to be. And so I don't need to be sitting like before on goal when I was working, 9 to 5, doing stuff for them, writing stuff for them all the time. I always had to have my laptop open with Twitter open in case something happened that I needed to react to. And so I was just constantly watching it and looking at it. And it does get you down. And I think one of the nicest things about the sort of change in my work pattern now is that I just don't need to do that anymore. And, I look at it from time to time, but it's just different. I don't have to be bang on top of everything and make sure that I'm reacting straight away to things. And it honestly it's improved my day-to-day life so much. It really has. It's a very nice thing. But yes, here's one from Jack now. Says, extra time. Arteta should get sacked. This is just what we were talking about. If we don't win a trophy this season, what's your opinion?
What about if Arsenal are 2-1 up in the Champions League final in the 89th minute? Who are they playing? You tell me. Erling Haaland scores a goal that should have been ruled out, but isn't. VAR don't intervene, whatever. And City win the Champions League on penalties. should you sack Mikel Arteta then?
Yeah, it obviously needs context, doesn't it? It's like if Arsenal finished 5th and they go out to Porto in the Champions League and they've already been knocked out of the cup competitions like we know they have early doors, is that a sackable offence for Arteta this season? So no Champions League football, disappointing showing in Europe and out of both domestic cup competitions. It's a tough one, isn't it? Because I don't think he probably should, but I don't think he could have any complaints if he did, if you see what I mean. But so yeah, it's a tough one, and a lot of people say, "Well, why don't you think he should be if that happens?" And I can understand that. A lot of people will think he should be sacked from that, but I just kind of feel like you're going back to square one a little bit again. I don't think that necessarily means that he's suddenly turned into a bad manager or the team's turned into a bad team overnight. I just think the Premier League's really, really difficult, and you can go out of Europe at any point. But I think a lot depends on the performances and everything like that of what we see over the next 5 months. But if Arsenal have an absolute car crash into the season and what I just described does happen, then personally, I probably wouldn't make a change. But again, I don't think he could have any complaints if the club decided, you know what, you've spent a lot of money, we've given you a lot of backing, we've let you shape the club the way you want to shape it, and you haven't been able to kick on this season, and we're going to look for something new. So, you know, I don't think he'd have any complaints, but I don't think I'd be there yet. I think you'd still, for me, I would still be giving him, you know, start of next season, see how it gets on and all that. But I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who'll be very different opinions than that.
Yep.
Agree?
Agreed. 100%. So nothing to add to that. It's spot on.
Right, let's move on then. Here's one from RVP is the future. RVP is the future.
Ooh. You know, though, actually on that, his son, this will make you feel old, Shaquille Van Persie, is on the new Football Manager. Very good. He's SVP, could be the future, but I wouldn't sign him for
Where's he playing?
He's a striker. I think he's at Schalke. Let me double check this. No, he's at Feyenoord. Sorry. You know when you play too much Football Manager and you think that where players end up on the game is where they are in real life. He's at Feyenoord. He's 17, which was about the sort of age RVP was when he came over.
I remember when Arsenal signed RVP and he got introduced to the crowd at Highbury. Go and search for it if you don't know what I'm talking about now, but he walked out in the hilarious pair of jeans.
Yes.
I have ever seen. Honestly, search for it now. If you put Van Persie jeans, Arsenal unveiling, it was hilarious. It was like, who on earth is this kid that Arsenal have just brought over? It did make me laugh.
The warning signs were there from day one.
Yeah. Right. So what does he say? RVP is the future says, hopefully this is unique enough for you to answer. Would Kai, with a Roy Keane or Cristiano Ronaldo mentality, be considered one of the best in the league? I can't help but think if he had more aggression, bite, or sheer will to win or be ruthless, he could tear this league up. I'm not a pro by any means, but I can't help but think he lacks oomph. And if someone can unlock him, he will turn into a beast. What are your thoughts on that?
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because like instinctively, I'm always like, oh, but how do you know he doesn't have that mentality? How do you know he's not a killer? Because you don't know him. And yet with Kai, I sort of think you can say by his actions that it's not quite there yet. You know, I think that the extra touches, it's not necessarily like, I don't really care that his body language is always a bit languid and a bit sort of shoulders down, because I always think with that, it's probably just how he feels comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think when he's on the ball, most of the time that I've seen him in England, going back to Chelsea as well, he's the extra touches, he always seems to be in his head. That's what it feels like watching him. Yeah, I definitely do. So in a way, yes, I do agree with this. I don't particularly like the Roy Keane or Cristiano Ronaldo mentality, and I do wonder how much that is going to work over the next 10, 15 years. You know, it's the equivalent of Jose Mourinho, isn't it? He can't connect with players anymore because the game and young people have moved on. But it's that thing that you've used in Succession, right? It's that thing that Brian Cox, why are their names all escape me? Logan says at the end of series 2 to not Roman, Why are the names gone for me? The oldest son.
Or the
And he
president.
said to him, yeah.
The guy ran for president.
No, oh, not the oldest son. He keeps getting forgotten, doesn't he? His middle son, the eldest boy. This is killing me. Anyway, as he says to him, "You're just not a killer." It just feels like Kai Havertz isn't a killer. I don't, but that you're not going to be able to change that. This is all like under the surface stuff. You need to accept that Kai Havertz can't have a Roy Keane or Cristiano Ronaldo mentality because
Kendall.
There we go. That's
How did I not get that? Honestly.
Oh no, it's been such a long year of TV. Succession was a lifetime ago. I genuinely don't think those sorts of things change in people. You know, I think Kai Havertz will always be a player that looks a bit introvert, that maybe does take things to heart a bit, or that's what it looks like on a football pitch. And I think hoping that we see that come from Kai, it's just a fool's errand. But what do you think? I mean, you know,
I get what you're saying. I mean, I think it's more in his actions when he's actually doing something with the ball that I sort of think he needs a bit more aggression, because I think he plays with aggression, and you know, I mean, look at the yellow cards he's picked up this season. He's already picked up 5, hasn't he? And you think back to the Newcastle game and the tackle that he flew in, and you know, he does play with aggression. I think it's one of his strengths almost, is that, you know, he presses well, he's there, but it's just when he's then on the ball, he just lacks that aggression. The like you said, the extra touches, the way he shoots, it's all very safe and soft, and you know, he very rarely puts his foot through the ball. It's like, well, I really liked his finish against Brighton because it went in, the ball went into the net with conviction. And I remember there was one shot in the game, I think it was against Sevilla, that he bent past the far post from the edge of the box, that it was just like, wow, I just haven't seen Kai Havertz shoot like that.
It was one that, like, you were like, you shouldn't have taken that. Like,
yeah.
And I like that you did.
Yeah. And it's just that conviction of actually putting his foot through the ball and hitting a pass, like drilling a pass into feet instead of just softly laying the ball off and stuff like that. I think the way he plays, I think it needs a bit more aggression when he's got the ball. But I think when he hasn't got the ball, I think the aggression's there, which is strange. But yeah, you know, would he be considered one of the best in the league with a Keane or Ronaldo mentality? I just don't know. I don't know. It's a hard one to answer. But I think, yeah, it just sort of strip that all away. And I would just like to see him, when he's on the ball, just show a little bit more conviction in absolutely everything he does. And, you know, hopefully he does. He can, but, you know, we'll have to wait and see on it. Just quickly talking about TV, I'll tell you what, it made me think of it when you were talking about Succession, and it's been a long year of TV. 25 years anniversary of Sopranos, by the way, and it was good to see that honoured at the Emmy, and James Gandolfini mentioned by Michael Imperioli. But me and Michelle, my wife, just finished watching Slow Horses on Apple, and I genuinely can't believe how good it was. It was absolutely fantastic. If you haven't watched it, if you're like me and someone who for some reason kind of ignored all the hype about it, then it is well worth a watch. Fantastic.
It is right at the top of my list. I downloaded it for holiday, but never got round to it.
Brilliant.
And once I get out of, I mean, are you watching Traitors?
Yes, although I missed yesterday's one, and I heard it was very good, and so I'm gonna catch up on it tonight, because it's
once
not my
that's done.
It's not my night putting the kids to bed tonight. It's my wife's night putting the kids to bed, which means I can sit down and have the TV for a change. So yeah, Traitors. I'm catching up on Traitors on that. We've got here one from Mo Gump, who is from Chicago. So thanks for great content. Let me start in true CW fashion with an apology for the length of this question. American sports fans, particularly baseball, can grow very attached to their announcers, play-by-play guys. Growing up here, I was blessed with some great voices in US sport history. Carey Brickhouse Foley. To this day, when I hear those voices, I'm instantly whisked back to my 8-year-old self helping dad in the garden with a radio stuck in the window. I love that scene. It's a great scene of a young kid listening to radio. It's just another way that sport can connect the generations, 100%. Who are those voices for you, James? Are there any? Do Premier League teams even have team announcers, or do different people do games every week? Can't really tell here in the States. So thanks for that. Mo Gump says, got your book for Christmas and loved every page. Thank you very much. Glad you enjoyed it. So yeah, what's their name? Is there sort of voices that you hark back to? I mean, to be fair, you're only 5 years old anyway, James. So I'm not sure. You're
We're
just
going
going
to
to
have
say
the
Martin
same.
Tyler,
No, I
aren't
think
you?
we're going to have the same one. Never Martin Tyler. I love you, Martin Tyler, but you just soundtrack too many heartbreaking moments for me. Yeah, I mean, so I have two, which I think you will remember quite fondly as well. Never a Motti guy. Felt Mott. My real issue, and there's a certain current Premier League commentator who falls afoul of this as well, is I can't stand it when I feel like someone's already written what they're going to say for any moment. You know, I hate when it's not in the moment. And that's why my favorite all-time commentator by miles is Barry Davis, because Barry Davis was always as surprised as you were. And I only sort of got the sort of tail end of him, and I never was old enough to hear him commentate on like the World Cup final. But I just loved when, you know, even when you see the clips back, you'll see one of the greatest goals you've ever seen, and Barry Davis will just go, "Oh, I say," and that's it. I love Mike Ingham as well on Five Live. I thought he had this great combination with Alan Green, who no one loved, but you needed someone like him. So, I mean, in terms as well of answering that Mo's question, Premier League teams sort of do have team announcers. So Arsenal have guys like Adrian Clark. We should also mention Russell Hargreaves, who sadly is no longer with us, passed away just before Christmas, I think. Great guy who I met a couple of times. But it's not quite the same. So, like, you know, in the States, I mean, I got my own US example as well. Mike Breen, who does play-by-play for the New York Knicks and ESPN NBA. Just an iconic voice, him and Walt Frazier. But no, I mean, come on, we're going to have the same. You've got to be Barry Davis, haven't you, Charles?
No, I'll tell you what, who I am, and it's going to be weird. It's Jonathan Pearce, but it's not for TV. It's growing up. He was the lead radio commentator for Capital Gold, which was 1548 medium wave in London. And the games I've been a season ticket holder at Highbury since 1991, but from like 88, 89, the whole title win up to Anfield. I wasn't going to those night games and stuff because I was too young, and I'd be sitting in my bedroom listening to my little red radio that I had, tuning into 1548 Capital Gold, and Jonathan Pearce was always commentating on the Arsenal games. And I just remember so many of those matches that season, listening to him commentate. I think of the Arsenal Wimbledon just before the trip to Anfield when Arsenal when they drew 2-2 at Wimbledon, and think of him when Nigel Winterburn scored that screamer at the clock end. And that was just a soundtrack to my life. I even had at the end of that season, I got the Capital Gold brought out a cassette tape of the season Arsenal season highlights to Jonathan Pearce commentating, and he used to go nuts as well, like so nuts when he was doing it on the radio. It's completely different to what he's like on the TV, and it's just I've got so many memories of those seasons listening to Capital Gold and Jonathan Pearce. So I'd say him. Just great memories of as a kid. Yeah, great memories.
I was certain you were going to say because of Robot Wars.
No, not because of Robot Wars. I mean, Paul Burrell as well, who was the Arsenal. He was a Highbury Stadium announcer for absolutely years. Everyone, some of the old school Arsenal fans will know exactly who I'm talking about there. He was just always the voice of Arsenal for a long time. Now we've got Peter, who's a great guy, and who I interviewed for Goal, and all the wrestling fans out there who hear me and everyone else banging on about the wrestling tunes when the team comes out for the second half. That's Peter's handiwork, and he's the stadium announcer now. And he's spoken before about the sort of debt he paid to Paul Burrell, who sort of took him under his wing when he first started and stuff like that. So yeah, there are stadium announcers. I don't know. I'm pretty sure
I think with announcers, he means like literally there. I mean, like, you would, because their local media is so splintered. You have like a traveling commentary team who will cover, like, for your local TV station, will cover every Chicago Bears, Chicago Bulls game. So yeah, we don't quite have that, other than sort of club media. But
club media.
It's not, it's not how, like you see the clips back. I was watching clips of the Giroud Scorpion kick, and I've probably seen Arsenal media's version of it so often that it's the commentary I associate with it. But it's it's much more about sort of Sky as well. But I mean, there's definitely something about radio where it feels more, I don't know, you feel in the moment more. I can still remember the commentary of Van Nistelrooy's missed penalty at Old Trafford like it was yesterday, and the same as well for Tony Adams. The radio commentary for Adams' goal against Everton in the double winning season. I mean, that stuff stays with you really strongly.
Yeah.
Yeah, good
There's,
times.
I love sport on the radio. I think it's absolutely fantastic. You know, I love driving home from some of the long trips I've had back from a game up north, like at Old Trafford or something like that, and you're coming home, you're listening to the night game, or the days that I've been listening to Sunday at the Masters, coming home
Yes,
from a long away
golf is
trip.
great on the
Yeah, it's
radio.
brilliant. Golf's fantastic on the radio, and rugby as well. You know, I'm not even a massive rugby fan, but I love listening to Six Nations or something like that on the radio. I just think it just really adds to it the way they describe it. I think it's such a fantastic skill, and yeah, I love sport on the radio. I think it's brilliant. Okay, we've got a couple more before we wrap this up. We started this thing thinking this was going to be a short one. We're up to an hour and 5 minutes now, and I'm very aware of that. But a couple on Seabird 1328 says, 1 year on, how would you grade the business we did in January last transfer window? In retrospect, would you have preferred a different move for different player or players? I thought this was an interesting one because I actually thought it was a decent transfer window for Arsenal in January. I really like Trossard. I think Jorginho's been a good signing. And Kivior's obviously struggling a little bit now. I do think there's a good defender in Kivior. He's not being helped by the fact when he does play, he's having to play out of position at the moment for Arsenal. We've not really seen him have any sort of run as a centre back for them. But I didn't think it was a terrible window. But it was also a window where they had to react, didn't they? Because their main targets they didn't get, and so they had to quickly sort of move on and react. And I thought they did react well. And they didn't spend huge amounts of money. Kivior was probably the most, wasn't he? Or maybe Trossard was just ahead of that. But Trossard's done a lot of good things. Again, he's not in the best of form right now, but no one is. But I think Trossard, you can't say was a bad signing by any means. And I still think he's got a really big part to play this season. So, it's a weird one. Would I have gone a different players? I don't know, because ultimately they were going for different players, but they didn't get those players, and so they had to quickly move and react in the way that they did.
Yeah, exactly. Those different players have to sort of be available to you. And I think, we both have to judge the January window based on, on a bit of a longer term view and sort of say how much have they strengthened the squad. And I think each and every one of those players is valuable. Yeah, Trossard is really off his form right now, but he's weighed in with so many assists and plenty of goals. Like, it's a really, really decent investment. Kivior as well, I'm confident on. And Jorginho, I was pretty anti signing him, and I think for the most part, I would say I've been wrong there. He's done the job. He's been solid for a year, and I think that's more than I thought he would be. And you also have to remember there was this real window that opened up here, and a year ago, and I don't think Arsenal could have done much different to attack it and win the title. Like, there are other players out there that would have got the goals, and maybe but they just gave it a really good go, and it fell short for reasons that were nothing to do with the signings they made. It was all about losing Saliba and Tomiyasu, and I think they're all still valuable, useful players. So, it's an 8 out of 10 window for me. It's still good.
Yeah.
And it's unfair to sort of write Trossard off because of a bad couple of months.
Yeah. I think I'm with you. I think the reason Arsenal didn't win the title last season was definitely not their business in the January transfer window. It was the fact that Saliba got injured and Tomiyasu got injured at the same time. Had those two staying fit, I think Arsenal probably have won the title. And I think we'd have looked at the business they did in January as playing a decent part in that. So, I don't think it was. I certainly don't look back at it now as an awful, dreadful window by any means. Okay, this is the last one now. It's from Kundu 2355. Says, question for you guys: if Partey performs well from now or from when he comes back until the end of the season, would you offer him a new contract? I feel it's extremely difficult to get a player with Partey's qualities. His ability to play passes between the lines is extremely underrated, and we have missed him this season. Partey is in the starting lineup, would immediately improve Odegaard and Saka. Love the show. So there you go, James. Would you, if he comes back and he stays fit and plays well between now and the end of the season, would you offer Thomas Partey a new contract?
You'd have a year left, right?
Yeah.
No, I don't think I'd rush to do that, because the fear with Partey is you'll lock yourself into more years of high wages for a player that's going to miss more games than he plays. So if he comes back tomorrow, he will still have missed most of half of the season.
So he'll be 31 in June.
So he'll be
Partey, and he'll have a
32 at the
year
end of his
left. So he'll be
contract.
32 at the end of his contract.
I mean, you know, if Thomas Partey wants to take a significant wage cut and sign up for one more year, then I might. But, you know, I mean, let's assume that's not on the table. And I just, no, you know, this sounds really harsh, but I think if any club should have learned this, it's Arsenal. You know, injured players, you still have to pay their wages in full. They still take up a space in your squad. And they complicate matters in terms of your future recruitment. So, no, I absolutely wouldn't offer Partey an extension. I wouldn't be. It doesn't necessarily mean I'd be rushing to cash in on him, because all along, I don't think Arsenal have ever looked at Partey and thought, we'll get our £50 million, whatever it was, back. It was, you know, the length of his contract. What do we get out of him there? And, you know, I don't think they thought they'd have the same player at the end of the contract that they got at the start. So I think with this one, I think you probably just let it roll if he has a good fitness season in 24-25. And if the maths works, then you have that conversation. But
I'm with you.
And like you were saying earlier, they do need to have a long-term solution for him as well.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't see how they can offer him a new contract, to be honest, yet in the summer. Like you said, it would seem quite a mad thing to do given his injury record. And look, Thomas Partey's a fantastic footballer, and Arsenal are a better team when he's in the team. But he is out an awful long time, and I don't see how you can offer a long-term contract to someone whose injury record has been what it has been since he's been at Arsenal, when he's going to be 32 at the end of that contract. I just think from a football and a business point of view, it just doesn't make any sense. And I wouldn't, again, same as you, I wouldn't be rushing out to sell him. I think if someone, you know, if some Saudi money came on the table for Thomas Partey, I'm sure Arsenal would probably be willing to accept that, just as they were last summer. But if that doesn't come, then I wouldn't be rushing to move him on. I'd keep him for the season. And if he means he goes on a free at the end of his contract, then so be it. You know, like exactly what you said, it was never a sign-in that you thought, oh, there's a sell-on value here on Thomas Partey. It just wasn't. You don't buy a 28-year-old midfielder or whatever he was, that's sort of late 27. He's 27 till he's 28.
That's how it works.
Player, and think there's got to be a big sell-on value there. And so I still think he'd have a big part to play next season, but and then you could potentially look at it at the end of that and say, okay, what do you want to do, Thomas, now? Do you want to take a big pay cut? Do you want to stay for another couple of years, see how your fitness has been next season, and you reassess it then? But I think for me, in the summer, no, I don't think you give him a new contract. I don't think it makes much sense from in sort of football business side of things.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, mate, 1 minute, 1 hour, 13 minutes for a show that we started off thinking, what are we going to talk about? We actually managed to talk about quite a lot of stuff. So thank you, everyone, for watching. I hope you enjoyed, or listening, of course, as well. I hope you enjoyed this week's show. I hope it made up for the absence of it last week. Like I said, I'll be at London Colney tomorrow for Mikel Arteta's press conference. That's 1:30, so keep your eyes peeled for all the usual stuff from me there. And then both of us, myself and James, will be at the Emirates on Saturday. I'm in the press box for this one, James.
Yay!
So I'll see you in there on Saturday. So again, all the usual live match stuff from both of us on that one. Until then, everyone, have a very good Thursday evening or Friday, depending on what time you're watching or listening to this. And we'll be back next week to do it all over again. Bye-bye.
See you soon.